Patients getting paid. What a concept. If your story's anything like mine, you had to dial back your job or leave it altogether thanks to your chronic illness. The paychecks quit coming, but the bills didn't, right? I spent years weeding through the scam job sites for flexible jobs and scam trainings for how to start an online business. I learned about paying patient advocacy gigs by overhearing someone talking about them on a bus. It's crazy the amount of time, energy, and money I spent trying to figure out how to work for myself or others in a flexible way that could accommodate doctor's appointments and hospital infusions or just not feeling well. Take advantage of my years of learning these tough lessons and get right to how to do it for yourself by signing up for my course, Patients Getting Paid, where you'll learn where to find these jobs and how to put your best foot forward in getting them or how to create your own flexible opportunities. Sign up right now for more information. Go to fumsnow.com/patients getting paid. Welcome to the FUMS Now podcast show, where you'll gain information, inspiration, and motivation for living your best life with multiple sclerosis. Find us online at FUMSnow.com. I'm your host, Kathy Reagan Young. My guest today is Dr. Carl McMillan, a holistic dentist and president of the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. He practiced traditional dentistry for 7 years. Then, in 1996, his second son was diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder, which ultimately changed his entire paradigm about dentistry and medicine. He studied with many leaders in the biologic, holistic realm of dental medicine. I asked him to talk to us today about the potential link between mercury in amalgam fillings, those silver fillings in your teeth, and MS. Let's get into it. Hello, Dr. McMillan. Thanks so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kathy, for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. So glad you're here. This has been a question on my mind almost since the first day that I was diagnosed, honestly. People started asking me if I had these silver fillings in my mouth, and I didn't even know what the heck they were talking about. I was so overwhelmed with this new diagnosis, but I'm so interested to talk to you, and I know the MS community is going to be interested to hear what you have to say. So if you would, please just tell us about going from traditional dentistry to holistic dentistry. Like, what is the difference between those, and why did you make that change?
Obviously, I could talk about that for probably
Oh,
hours,
I
but I'll
bet.
try to keep it short. My background was traditional dentistry, of course,
Hmm.
but even through my training, I questioned almost everything.
Hmm.
And I happened to question the mercury issue in dental school, and I was told to sit down, shut up, and learn what I
Mm.
was supposed to learn, or I wouldn't make it through dental school.
Mm.
So I did that and came out a traditional dentist,
Hmm.
placing amalgams, mercury fillings daily, removing them sometimes daily, unsafely.
Mm.
But more and more added up to me that it was just not a healthy situation. And
Mhm.
there's so much more to it than just the mercury thing, which we'll probably get into a little later. But those kinds of questions in my head, and then talking with patients and learning really from patients, teetered my mind, I would say, on should I be doing this or should I not? And ultimately, there were two things that happened in my life that I think you've mentioned one of them in the intro, and that is my son, my second son, was progressing very normally up until about 17 months old. And he took a turn, and I'll describe it for I don't know if most of your group is are ladies or not, but mothers would know this,
Mhm.
I think, more than dads
Mhm.
because mothers are more in tune with babies. But when a baby, a newborn baby, a toddler, when they're learning and discovering, it's like you can look into their eyes and see directly into their soul. And Colin, my son, was just like that. And then all of a sudden, at about 17 months, the lights went out. That's the only way I know how to
Mm.
describe it. I mean, there was no soul.
Mm.
He regressed, stopped speaking, stopped wanting to participate with us as a family, but also with his group in daycare. And unfortunately, we tossed it off at first to some trauma in the family, and
Mhm.
that it was just his way of dealing. But as time went on, he was born in 93. So by 1996, it was obvious that there was something significantly wrong. And
Mhm.
he was diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder with multiple characteristics of that. But the most severe was sensory integration and apathetic emotion towards people.
Mm.
So that pushed me to search. And
Mhm.
I know this is a long answer to a
Mm.
kind of a simple question, but
No, I
that
appreciate.
pushed me to search what could have caused this.
Mhm.
And simultaneously, my mother in law was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's
Mm.
at 56 years old.
Oh my gracious, that's young.
And the more and more I dug, the more things pointed to heavy metal toxicity,
Mm.
not just mercury, but heavy metal toxicity. And so I went down that path and sought out whomever I could learn from around the world. And so I traveled to Europe, traveled to Canada, traveled to Colorado and Mexico, learning from people that believed that mercury was indeed one of the causes or contributory to these phenomena that I was seeing with my family.
Mhm.
So, with that learning, I said, no more mercury in my office. I mean, I
Mhm.
literally walked in one morning and said, throw it all away.
Wow.
We're never doing it again.
Uh-huh.
And completely transformed my practice into what I call holistic, not just biological, because there are colleagues of mine that are biological that do things the right way.
Mhm.
But holistic to me means that I consider the entire human organism, not just their teeth.
Mm.
As far as what I'm doing with dentistry, I know that everything we do has an impact, positive or negative, on the human being.
Mhm. Well, I can tell you that the sound of the drill has quite the effect on this human being. I
Yeah, it
y
does on many.
Oh my gosh, the anxiety. Well, thank you for sharing all of that, and, how's Colin doing now?
He is a he's 26-year-old, beautiful young man. He's doing well. He's most people that meet him would never think, oh, there's something.
Mhm.
There's still some things that are obvious, but
Mhm.
we detoxed him for 3 years and have encouraged him diet wise and making healthy choices,
Mm.
avoiding certain things that we think are toxic to him. Um, but overall, functioning very well. He's an
Good.
emergency medical technician, an EMT at a ski resort, and
Very cool.
he's doing well.
Good. Good. I'm glad to
Yeah,
hear that. So, it's the mercury, as you said, in the amalgam fillings that is the potential issue, right?
sure.
Okay. Yes, and probably. Are there
Yes, yes, and
right.
so I can go into that more. Would you like that?
Well, I would, but just let me ask you this question first. Are there any tests to determine if a person has elevated mercury levels like before removing the fillings?
Yes,
I know we're going to go deep. We're going to have to go deep.
yes.
So, I hope you planned a little time here so
Okay.
because I can see where we're going to have to go in different directions here to explain this. But
Yeah. So let me answer your second question
okay.
first. So mercury is it is the one toxic metal. It's the second most toxic element known to man. It's only
Wow.
less toxic than plutonium,
Ugh,
radioactive uranium.
wow.
So only second to that. It is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's in the
Mhm.
soil, it's in the air, higher levels in some places than other places, depending on coal fuel power plants, industry, all sorts of things increase
Mhm.
it in the air and in the soil, but it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. But the one thing that's unique about it is that it's liquid at room temperature.
Mhm.
In fact, it's liquid all the way down to minus temperatures.
Hmm.
And its vaporization rate, meaning how much vapor comes off of it,
Mhm.
doubles every 10 degrees Fahrenheit.
Mm.
So it's everywhere. We're all exposed. We're exposed more if we have fillings.
Mhm.
Used to be and still is to some degree exposed more to it if we have vaccines.
Mm. Mhm.
So the mercury in fillings is a problem. I'm getting back to your first question without completely answering your second question. How we measure or what testing can be done is and this is why I'm taking so long to answer that question. It is so tricky because mercury does not stay in the blood very long.
Mm.
It has a very high affinity for what we call sulfur groups or thiol groups. And the higher concentration of thiol groups or sulfur groups are in central nervous system, brain and spinal
Mm.
cord,
Mm.
nerves,
We know all about
and
that.
yes, and organs.
Mm.
So fatty protein tissue.
Mhm.
If we let's just take for example, if you have unfortunately have a mercury filling put in today
Mhm.
and you start feeling bad a week from now and you go to the doctor and they say and you think, oh, I'm mercury poisoned, and they go along with you and they say, okay,
Mhm.
let's test you, and they draw some blood. It's going to come back normal
Mm.
because it's left the bloodstream within a couple hours really,
Hmm.
but
Okay.
certainly within a week, and it goes into the tissues. So that's one issue with being able to test
Yeah.
for elevated mercury levels. And elevated is quite the word there because our body does not use mercury for anything. There is
Mm.
not one biochemical pathway for mercury to be used in the body.
So if there's any, it's elevated.
That's exactly right.
How about that for an English major? I just want to point out. I just think I did some science there.
There you did.
Whoop,
So,
whoop.
where does it go? It goes into the tissues. And then our wonderful bodies typically have a varied ability to detox all heavy metals, but mercury being one of those.
Mhm.
So, measuring again, I'm still trying to answer this question of is there a test?
Right.
So, blood test, not really a good test unless there's an acute exposure.
Okay.
Then there's something called hair analysis,
Mhm.
where we can clip a little bit of hair and measure mineral content of the hair and heavy metals. You may be familiar with famous case here in North Carolina, the Black Widow.
Oh,
Blanche Taylor Moore
yes.
was the lady that was killing off all the men in her life.
Yes.
And they would even exhume her dad, who had been buried for decades,
Right.
and test his hair to find out that she had poisoned him too with
Yeah.
arsenic. So, hair is one of the ways that we detox if we're good detoxers.
Mm.
And again, Kathy, I apologize, but I'm getting deep into
No,
this
I
whole
appreciate
way to
this.
test.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I appreciate this.
So, if we test the hair and there are high levels of mercury in the hair, what does that really tell us? Does it tell us that we are toxic with mercury, or does it tell us that we are detoxing mercury? I think it tells us both.
Mhm.
But high levels in hair at least tell us that we are able to get rid of mercury.
Mhm. We're good processors.
Yes, good processors. So you know a good bit about this. So an example, and I'm going to go back to my son. It was discovered in a couple of studies that autistic kids seemed not to have mercury in their hair, where normal kids of the same age, control kids, would have mercury in their hair.
Mm.
So there were two schools of thought on that. And I'm going to be blunt here and say that there was an idiot that said it seems that maybe autistic kids may need a little bit of mercury in their diets. And then there were some brilliant people that said, "Oh my God, that's it. They can't detox heavy
Mhm.
metals.
They're not good processors.
They're not good processors." That's right. So testing hair may tell us something,
Mhm.
but it may not tell us the truth. I can't tell you how many people come to me and say, "I had my hair tested and there's no mercury there, so they tell me that mercury is not my issue."
Mm.
Well, I look at them and say, it most likely is your issue, but not because it's your issue. Detox is your issue.
Mhm.
So, third, we've talked about blood and hair.
Mhm.
So, the third way to test is to test either urine or fecal matter.
Mhm.
And if we're good detoxers, there will be some mercury in either of those
Mhm.
body excrements. But if we're not good detoxers, there won't necessarily be very
Mhm.
much in there. So there is a process where a doctor can provide a what's called a chelator
Mhm.
to take before collecting those samples and collect urine over 6 or 24 hours and a 24-hour stool, and then the numbers go way up.
Mm. 'Kay.
And the reason that we have to administer that chelator is because mercury, particularly, is bound so heavy in those tissues I was talking about. They form covalent bonds and often dicovalent bonds to these sulfur groups. And it's a very, very strong bond and hard to break.
Mm. It's the super glue of the body.
Yes.
Got it.
So, really, what we're able to pull out in a chelation challenge test like that is what happens to be loosely bound in the tissue and probably in the fatty tissue
Mm.
more so than the protein tissue.
Mm.
So, those are the three commonly
Mhm.
accepted ways to test for mercury level. But
Okay.
interpretation is the most important part of any of those.
Mhm.
Because again, you could say, "Oh, there's none in the blood, it's not an issue. There's none in the
Mhm.
hair, it's not an issue. There's none or there's very little in the urine or fecal matter,
Mhm.
it's not an issue." Well, that's not true.
Mhm.
Um, so we've learned that we have to go much deeper into what's the individual's ability to detox.
Mhm.
So, in amalgam, back to your first part of this number two question, mercury is the most toxic of the elements found in amalgam. There's
Okay.
silver, copper, tin, and zinc as well. And all of those can be toxic, but they don't readily leach out of
Mm.
amalgam.
Mhm.
Mercury is what leaches out 24/7. It off gases. Again, if you remember what I said about vaporization rate,
Mhm.
in a mouth that's 97 to 98 degrees all the time,
Mhm.
its vaporization rate doubles every 10 degrees Fahrenheit and it vaporizes at 0 degrees. So we're at 9 to 10 times basic vaporization rate in the mouth.
Got it.
You add some hot coffee or hot soup or
Mhm.
acidic food to that and you increase it,
Wow.
or toothbrushing for that matter.
Mm. So, what would send somebody to you suspecting that they have mercury poisoning and or to say they want their amalgams removed? Like what are the symptoms?
The symptoms,
Mhm.
lots and lots of varied things. Brain fog, neuropathies, tingling in the fingers, the toes, the
Oh, yep.
back,
Yep, we
the
know all
back of
about
the
that.
skull,
Mhm.
face, nose. those sorts of things are probably the most common,
Mm-hmm.
along with, Parkinson's-like symptoms.
Mm-hmm. Shaking, that sort of thing.
Sure, shaking,
Tremors, yeah.
tremors about anywhere, but
Hmm.
particularly head. Most of us don't notice a whole lot with our hands until it's really bad, but
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing when you just sit and talk to somebody and watch. Sometimes they have a tremor in their head and they don't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
They're not even aware.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Don't they call that's like an umbrella essential tremors?
yes, essential tremor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are those things, and then there are other things like inability to conceive for young women
Mm.
or young men. I've had
Mm-hmm.
even a young man that came to me, and his sperm count was so low, and there was no explanation for it. And we removed his mercury, and sperm count went up 1,000 times.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there's so many because the information highway is so open to us today with the
Mm-hmm.
internet.
Mm-hmm.
People just research and find their symptoms,
Right.
you know, correlated even with not necessarily demonstrably caused by, but correlated with mercury,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll say, you know what, it's worth getting them out just
Yeah.
to see.
Why leave them, right?
Yeah,
So I understand that there's a very particular removal technique to, I guess, in essence, to decrease the exposure of the mercury for the patient as they're being removed, right?
correct.
I would assume someone would need some pretty specific training for that procedure, or can any dentist do it correctly? I assume any dentist could do it. I guess
Yeah.
I should put the modifier on there
And
correctly.
sadly, all dentists do
Hmm.
it, but they don't do it correctly. They don't all do it
Okay.
correctly. So, yes, there's special, and I'm doing the air quote unquote, special training for it.
Hmm.
It is more learning than training because there is not really anything super secret about it
Hmm.
or special. And if dentists really were aware and awake, they'd want to do it not only to protect the patient, but to protect themselves, their
Themselves. That's what I was
staff,
going to ask.
and the
Yeah, that
atmosphere.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the environment. So yes, there's special training, special techniques, which I don't know how much detail you want me to go into there, but
Well, really, I just knowing that there are special techniques. So if anyone in the community listening here is interested in having this done, it would be recommended to seek out someone who has had some special training in this. That's fair to say?
yes, and
Mhm.
at the end of our conversation, I can give some guidance to where people can go to find list of things that they like.
Oh.
I believe that we should all interview our dentist and
Hmm.
find out if they fit the bill,
Mhm.
because there are a lot of claims that it's done safely, but they skip steps, and
Mm.
you don't want any steps
Right.
at all.
And this is obviously not something that's taught in dental school. This is something you have to seek out specific training on.
That's correct.
Got it. Okay, so can you please walk us through the process? Like from the time an MS patient would come to you with concerns about having their amalgams in their mouth. They come to you and they say, I'm gonna guess most people have read about things or someone has said to them, like they did to me when I was first diagnosed, hey, you might consider this, have these things removed. And so maybe they come to you and say, hey doc, this is what I've read. It sounds interesting. Why wouldn't I? Kind of what's the next steps?
So they often do come in and say exactly that.
Mhm.
They want to know my personal and professional opinion, and they would come in. I would let them ask their questions. I would tell them some of the things that we've already talked about, like testing and
Mhm.
what my beliefs are about the testing and what it really tells us. I talk a lot about that it is the second most toxic element known to man.
Yeah, that's a shocking headline. You don't wanna bury that lead.
Yeah, our government actually produces a book, and it's about 2.5 inches thick, that is titled the Toxicological Update for Mercury. It's got 23, I believe it's 23 sightings of amalgam in it. But still, at that point, I go over all of that and I say, okay, so you have MS is considered an autoimmune disorder.
Hmm.
And autoimmune, in my opinion, is an enigma.
Mm.
And I say it that way, not derogatorily, but our bodies are not designed to fight themselves. So, with that in mind, I believe that there has to be something foreign to cause the body to attack.
Mm. Hmm. Makes sense.
Yeah. So, couple that thought with some research. The Melissa Foundation, I believe is what it's called, did some studies back in the 90s and maybe early 2000s where they recognized that there's a segment of the population that is allergic to mercury,
Mm. Wow. How does that present?
like MS.
I was just going to say, wait, let me guess. Wait for it.
Yeah. So their hypothesis proved out to be that exposure to mercury. Remember, I said something about mercury binds
Hmm.
tightly to tissue, and particularly
Protein tissue.
nervous tissue.
Hmm.
So it binds tightly and changes the protein of myelin sheath.
Mm.
And then the body says, oh, this isn't me. And it
Attack, attack,
attacks.
attack.
Yes. Thus, we call it autoimmune, but it's really our immune system doing what it's supposed to do, trying to get rid of something foreign.
Mm.
So I explain all of that and I just say, so if we know that we can control this one toxic thing to it's toxic to everybody, but it's
Hmm.
more toxic to some people,
Sure. Processors.
right?
Right.
So should we leave it in your mouth? And my answer is very easy. No,
Yeah.
it shouldn't be there. But am I going to force you or one to take it out?
Hmm.
No, it's got to be your decision.
Sure.
And it needs to be done safely.
Hmm.
So at that point, I turn to okay, what kind of support do you have? Do you have the support of a good integrative functional medicine doctor
Hmm.
that can help you make sure A, that your colon and your liver and your kidneys are functioning at the best possible level that they can?
Mm.
Because when we take mercury out of your teeth, there's no longer an exposure, a continual exposure for you, but you've got this body burden that will then redistribute.
Mm.
So, can your body again process
Mhm.
and get it out? So, I encourage them to have, a good support team,
Mhm.
a medical support team that can help them make sure functions are proper and
Mhm.
that they have the best detox support possible, whether that be with chelators or other supplements that the doctor sees fit to help this particular patient with.
Just for clarifying purposes, you mentioned some key organs there, and that is because they are the key detoxifiers. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So if they have that support and the doctor feels that they are ready, then we come up with a plan of what, how many, and in what order do we remove their amalgam safely,
Mhm.
and we get them out.
Can you do more than one in a day?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna make a quick statement about that and just say the goal of a safe protocol is to expose the patient to less than they're exposed to daily with them just sitting in their mouths.
Mm. Okay. Makes sense.
So getting them out, and my mentor, Hal Huggins, he's deceased now, but Hal very much believed that the process should be relatively quick. Now, we take into consideration the physical health of the patient and don't push any envelopes there, but the
Mhm.
sooner the exposure is gone, the better for the patient.
Mhm. Yep, makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, okay. This is just so enlightening. It's really lots of wows are happening in my head. Can you share with us any specific examples of MS patients that you've treated and that have seen improvement or resolution even of their MS symptoms upon removal of their amalgams?
I can. I have several that have had some improvement, some spontaneous remission. I think the earlier MS is caught, diagnosed, and
Mhm.
toxins are removed from the patient, whether it be physically from the patient's body or from their environment. And that's a whole nother can of worms there.
Right.
But yeah, I've had some very severely affected MS patients that we didn't see a whole lot of resolution,
Mhm.
and I believe to this day that's because of another factor that we haven't gotten into very much. I mean, we've touched on processing or detoxing,
Mhm.
but we're all different in our abilities to detox.
Mhm.
And when we consider all the factors, methylation issues, something called MTHFR, you're probably familiar with that. It's a big buzzword these days with genetics, but our ability to make glutathione in the
Mhm.
cells, all of the different detox pathways, I believe affect whether somebody gets more or less resolution.
Mhm. Well, that makes sense. And
Yeah,
certainly the further into any disease state, the less
sure.
optimal you are your body's performing, right?
Sure. And the more degradation of nervous tissue, the longer it takes
Mhm.
for it to heal,
Yeah,
if it can, in fact, heal.
right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So, okay, once the amalgam is removed, it has to be replaced with composite, right? That's the white filling?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sensing you have an opinion on that, which I'm glad. I'm glad. I want to hear all about this. But I read that the majority of composites contain derivatives of BPA,
Yeah.
which I recognized BPA as my plastic bottle that I drink my water out of, and you shouldn't leave it in your car, and it leaches hormone. All these things. It's a chemical found in a lot of plastics, which can disrupt hormones in the body. So, if we're trying to be ultra safe, does it make sense to use composite after you've removed amalgam?
That's a great question. Great group of questions and
Yeah, right.
statements.
Sorry, I'm chatty Cathy, but that all was just had to come out of my head. I'm
That's good.
detoxing through my mouth.
It's all good. So BPA, let's touch on that first. Yes, it is a xenoestrogen-like chemical. So it can cause a lot of disruption of our normal hormone balance. And we should avoid as much BPA as possible. Composites, as you mentioned, are the white
Mhm.
fillings. Most of the older ones did contain varying levels of BPA.
Mhm.
We have some really great composites that are, I'm going to call them new. They're 5 to 8 years old at this
Mhm.
point that are BPA free.
Nice. That helps.
Yes, it does help. I will mention real quick, though, that the IAOMT, the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology, did sponsor a study with an independent research lab a number of years ago, and they tested a whole gamut of BPA containing composites and cured them like we do. You know, we put the ultraviolet light on them and harden them, polymerize them, and they tested them before polymerization, during polymerization, after full polymerization, 24 hours later, 48 hours later, varying times,
Mhm.
and basically came to the conclusion that there is very little BPA leaching after the first hour.
Okay.
Not to say that it's not all additive,
Mhm,
it
right.
is, but it's not like mercury fillings leach. There's estimations by some scientists that it would take about 80 years for it to leach enough of the mercury out of the filling for it to fall apart, because the mercury is what's binding all the other metals together in an amalgam. So, with that said, BPA is not leaching ongoing.
Right.
It's there and then it's
One and
gone.
done.
Yeah,
Got it.
exactly.
Okay. So that would be a step up from an amalgam, but even better is the BPA free that's now available.
Absolutely.
Got it.
So, and a step above that would be ceramics.
Oh, okay.
And not to get into a whole different subject, but I will tell you that unfortunately, most teeth that have amalgam in them, mercury fillings, also have fractures that are caused by those amalgams. So they not only
Mm.
poison us, but they break our teeth.
Oh,
They crack our
God.
teeth because of expansion and contraction. So when I look at teeth to be restored that have amalgam in them, I look at the physical integrity of the tooth and determine whether or not the tooth is even a candidate to be filled at all or not.
Mm-hmm.
So there are many variables to what
Right.
we decide, but the material itself, BPA free composite is the safest composite. Ceramics, porcelain, inlays, onlays, crowns are better, in my opinion, long
Mm-hmm.
term. Um,
Rather
and
than
some,
filling, you're saying. Got
and
it.
sometimes necessary. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. That's so interesting. I mean, who among us has ever thought to ask these questions about what's going into our heads? That's
yeah,
just, I mean, like in retrospect, after, having started this conversation with you now, I'm thinking, and why the hell wouldn't we have thought to ask that question?
right.
But yeah, no, I never thought to ask that. This is so interesting. So, do you advocate for everyone to have all the amalgams removed and replaced, regardless of their at least apparent health?
I would say unequivocally to that, no.
Oh, you surprised me on that one.
Yeah.
You told me you might
I
surprise me.
told
That
you I
one,
was
I
gonna
know.
surprise you. Now, that's professionally, I'm
Mm-hmm.
answering that question. Personally, absolutely, unequivocally, yes,
Yeah.
I would recommend that they be removed. Not only because of the mercury toxicity issue, but because of what they're doing to our teeth. They crack our teeth, which leads to root canals. Root
Mm-hmm.
canals are toxic in themselves.
Oh, I have a question for you about that too.
Okay,
Don't go there yet.
I
I just,
won't. Okay.
yeah, okay.
All right. So, on a professional level,
Yeah.
if somebody comes in to me and says, I want them all out, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
arguing with them.
Sure.
I'm happy to do it.
Sure.
If they come in and say, I've read this stuff, I don't have any health issues.
Mm-hmm.
Are they okay? Do they
Mm-hmm.
look okay? Or are they
Yeah.
servicing
Are
me
they
okay? I
cracking?
professionally have to say, yes, they are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I educate the patient anyway about the
Mm-hmm.
toxicity. Educate them about the expansion and contraction, show them the fractures in the teeth, let them make their decision.
Mm. Yeah, that's good. I like it. Does dental insurance, most dental insurance that you're aware of, cover that cost? Okay, you just answered my question. Thank you. Yeah, we're familiar from the lack of medical or health insurance
Yeah,
helping us. So
I
this is a surprise.
call dental insurance dental aid
Dental aid.
because it was never set up as medical insurance. I mean,
Hmm.
the mouth is not connected to the rest of the body, so it couldn't
Right.
possibly be medical.
Exactly. Correct.
So, dental insurance was set up for simple stuff. People getting a cleaning once or twice a year, a
Hmm.
filling here and there. It was never set up to cover major restorative dentistry.
Hmm.
And so the very first dental insurance plans that came out covered $1,000 a year.
Hmm.
Believe it or not, that was in the 40s, late 40s.
Mm.
And today, we
Hmm.
still have dental plans that only pay $1,000 a year.
Yeah. I think I have one.
Yeah.
I do.
The
I'm
very
not
best
joking.
ones cover $3,000 a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, dental insurance will cover things that can be justified to
Hmm.
be, it's funny. medically necessary,
There it
dentally
is.
necessary,
Mhm.
but they will not cover safe removal. They
Mhm.
won't. They don't believe that mercury is not safe to start with, so they certainly wouldn't cover it. They wouldn't cover it as an elective thing to just replace the fillings. Um, so,
Right.
but that doesn't mean, I would say my average patient gets their full complement of dental coverage,
Mhm.
but it doesn't go very far.
Mhm. Right. Gotcha. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned to you, over the years, lots of people have talked to me about the possibility of the mercury and amalgam fillings being at least, part of the potential cause of MS. So, in preparation for this interview, I read a ton of articles and studies, and I have to tell you, I don't know what to think. I mean, that was before I spoke with you. Now I have a lot more clarity rather than just reading this stuff. So, and there were some very compelling findings, but they were in pretty small studies. At least the ones, I didn't do a total comprehensive
Mhm.
on this, but the ones I saw were pretty small studies. Which, oh, by the way, I wanted to mention to everybody, as always, I will have all these links in the show notes. So you can look at all these studies and decide for yourself as well. But I think it's fair to say, at least from what I found, there's more sort of anecdotal evidence than scientific evidence. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I think there's more and more science,
Mm-hmm.
and I think if we compile the science with ability to detox, relative toxicity, immunology, what patients' immune systems are like,
Sure.
all of the different factors. The problem is that no study covers all of those things.
Right. And it's all, as you say, it's all one body. So,
Yes. So, there's more and more evidence, like I mentioned the Melissa study earlier.
hmm
There are more and more studies that do, in fact, point to at least a link, if
hmm
not causation.
hmm
Um, and again, I would argue with most anyone that it's more because we're all different. It's
hmm
kind of, again, I'm going to go back to my son. Well, why, if and I'm a believer that vaccines are a problem,
hmm
were a major problem in the mid '80s all the way up to mid 2007 or so. Why were all kids not affected the same?
hmm
Well, we're not all the same.
hmm
We don't have the same ability to detox.
hmm
We don't have the same methylation genes. I mean, I can go on and on.
Right.
I don't want to belabor that, but the anecdotal part of the evidence is, I mean, it's exactly that. It's anecdotal
Right.
because there is no comprehensive study, and who wants to be a part of that
Yeah.
study?
That'd be quite
Um,
the guinea pig.
yeah,
Yeah.
you fell into a part of, if you will, a part of that study,
hmm
becoming a, I don't want to call you a victim, but a, person
hmm
affected
Yeah.
by this,
hmm
and so we get anecdotal evidence all the time, but
hmm
unless we could do a comprehensive study where we said, okay, Kathy has X, Y, and Z genes, and she's
hmm
been exposed to this
Right.
and that, and
Throughout her life. Yeah.
yeah,
That'd be pretty
um,
tough.
and her diet is this, and
Oh
I
boy,
mean,
let's not
there's
go there.
so many factors. There's no way we're ever going to get to a compilation, if you will, of
hmm
scientific evidence to say it's causation.
Right.
However, let's go back to that whole thing I said about our government produces this book on
hmm
mercury toxicological profile. It's the second most toxic element known to man. Who wants, even if it's
Right.
not the cause, who wants to have that in their bodies?
Right. Right. Agreed. Agreed. But here's the other thing. I think that I, I'm just going to guess that a lot of folks with MS are thinking, why, if this is so bad for me, particularly because I have a lot of the same kinds of now I'm using the air quotes, symptoms that we were just talking about, the tingling and the numbness and
Mhm.
all of that, neuropathy. Why hasn't my MS doctor, why isn't that one of the first things that my MS doctor said to me was, okay, get that out. But it sounds to me, well, no, I'm not gonna guess. Why would that be?
Yeah. So it goes back to what I didn't fully answer in the previous question and the anecdotal science. We have to also look at who produces the science, who was it
Mhm.
paid for,
Mhm.
who paid for it,
Mhm.
what outlook were they looking for, what outcome were they looking
Mhm.
for, and all of that science. I have a daughter-in-law that's a physician. She's just in her residency now, and we're so overwhelmed when we're being trained with information that we have to buy it at face value.
Mhm.
We can't even really question it.
Yeah. Drinking from the hose at that point.
Yes, exactly. And so we proverbially get these blinders on, and what we've been taught is the law. It
Right.
is what it is. There's no variation
Mhm.
from it. It's fact,
Mhm.
without ever questioning. And so I would tell you that your MS doc, like any other MS doc, only knows what they know.
Mhm.
They only believe what they can see.
Mhm.
And so I will go again all the way back to the beginning of your introduction to me. And I believe that it takes a proverbial slap in the face
Mhm.
for each of us to change our paradigms.
Mhm.
And the doctors that are out there talking about vaccine damage, they're talking about it not because one or two of their patients were harmed,
Mhm.
but they're talking about it because their child was harmed.
Mhm.
It takes a personal effect on us for us to change or to get rid of those blinders and look outside that box.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, this audience has all had our own personal slap in the face, so
Yeah.
I'm glad to bring this information to everybody. So I told you I was going to ask you about this, and I didn't tell you earlier because I just thought about it. But I just posted recently an article about root canals, and just it's just awful stuff from what I can see. And I happen to have several. So I suspect this is probably a whole nother episode in and of itself, and I apologize if it
It's okay.
is. But I'm just what can you tell us about root canals? And like I said, I'm hearing some dire warnings about them as well. And I have amalgams and I have root canals. What the hell?
I would be happy to, in fact, do a separate talk if you'd like on root canal so that we don't go any longer than you want to today. But
Okay.
what can I tell you about root canals? I will tell you to start with, it is as controversial as amalgam, and it
Okay.
shouldn't be. How shall I summarize this to make it simple? Leaving a dead body part.
Well, really, you could just leave it right there. Like, leaving a dead body part? Question
Yeah.
mark.
Question mark.
Right?
Yep.
That sums it up.
That does sum it up.
And I would love to have you back to talk more about that. But I think that's a great um, synopsis, probably, of what we will talk about at length next time you come back.
Sure.
I
Be happy
appreciate
to.
that. In fact, Dr. McMillan, I can't tell you how appreciative I am for you taking the time that you've taken with me to talk about this and educate us all on this really important topic that, it's been on the periphery for years of the MS world. I mean, I was diagnosed 12 years ago. It goes back probably 30 years ago, but in those 12 years, I've heard it here and there, sort of almost whispered. And I'm interested, and so I looked into it. And I'm online all day, every day, and I do a lot of deep dives into literature and whatnot. And every once in a while, something pops up, but it's not easily found. And I certainly haven't found any podcasts that have gone into detail like this. So I just am so grateful to you for having taken the time to really educate us on this really important situation that probably a lot of us are in.
Mhm.
And we should, to be able to find education on this has not been easy. So I appreciate you sharing the time with me and sharing this education with my community. And if people have more questions about this, where can they find more information?
They certainly can go to the IAOMT.org.
Hmm.
So www.iaomt.org. We have a wonderful library of literature and research there. They can certainly go online to International Academy of Mercury Free Dentist, IAMFD.
Mm,
That's a retired dentist, and he has a whole host of research on his site as well. And then, of course, all of the dentists on the IAOMT
hmm.
website have their own websites with their own things. Like my
Yeah.
website has a list of questions that people should be asking dentists before they go see them.
And they're all listed there on the IAOMT.org site, right?
Yes, that's
Excellent.
correct.
Okay, so that sounds like the hub.
Yep.
Start there. And as I said before, all of these clickable links will be in the show notes at fumsnow.com/podcast. So, again, Dr. McMillan, thank you so much. Really appreciate the time, the sharing of the knowledge, and just bringing us up to date on something that, hasn't been at the forefront, but we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome, Kathy. Thank you.
Wow, I found that interview with Dr. McMillan really interesting. I hope you got a lot of value from this and all of the other episodes I've produced. I've paid all online hosting fees and editing fees, URL fees, everything out of my own pocket for the first 9 years of FUMS. I just can't keep doing that. I found this platform called Patreon that allows people to support FUMS by committing to contribute something each month. It tells me what I'm doing is of value and that I'm not out here all alone. If you get value from FUMS and would like to see it continue, please go to patreon.com/FUMS and help contribute what you can. Help crowdsource keeping FUMS alive. I've even set up rewards for various contribution levels. So check it out at patreon.com/FUMS. And thanks in advance for your support.